seen.
Received constitutional majority. House Bill number 243 is declared passed the House.
If everybody hangs in there, we have 2 more bills and we're out. I said 9, but it may be a little bit after.
Representative Longhurst.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker. We're going to go to item number 5, Senate Bill 6 with Senate Amendment 1 to Representative Schwarzkopf.
Representative Schwarzkopf.
Mr. Acting Speaker, I have Senate Bill number 6 read in for the third and final time, brought before the House.
Mr. Puffer, please read in Senate Bill 6 by title only.
Mr. Acting Speaker, Senate Bill number 6 as amended, sponsored by Senator Huxtable and Representative Schwarzkopf and Representative Parker Selby and Representative Harris, Representative Hilofsky and other senators and representatives, an act to amend Title VII of the Delaware Code in Chapter 108, Volume 62 of the Laws of Delaware, as amended by Chapter 99, Volume 72 of the Laws of Delaware, relating to clarifying the Warner Grant Trust and the jurisdiction of the Court of Chancery as an arbiter of disputes regarding the Warner Grant Trust land. Mr. Acting Speaker, this concludes the reading of Senate Bill number 6 as amended by Senate Amendment number 1.
Representative Schwarzkopf.
Mr. Acting Speaker, I have a pre-filed amendment. May I have it read in?
Please read it in.
I haven't got it. It's got to be read in.
Mr. Acting Speaker, House Amendment number 1 to Senate Bill number 6, sponsored by Representative Schwarzkopf. Mr. Acting Speaker, this concludes the final reading of House Amendment number 1.
Representative Schwarzkopf.
Mr. Acting Speaker, I have a House Amendment number 1 to House Amendment number 1 to Senate Bill number 6 I'd like to strike.
House Amendment 1 to House Amendment 1 to Senate Bill 6 is hereby stricken. Representative Schwarzkopf.
Mr. Acting Speaker, I have a House Amendment 2 to House Amendment number 1 to Senate Bill number 6. May I have it read in, please?
Please.
I got it here.
Please present your amendment. Mr. Puffer, please read the amendment when distributed.
Mr. Acting Speaker, House Amendment number 2 to House Amendment number 1 to Senate Bill number 6, sponsored by Representative Schwarzkopf. Mr. Acting Speaker, this concludes the final reading of House Amendment number 2 to House Amendment number 1 to Senate Bill number 6.
House Amendment number 2 to House Amendment number 1 is now attached to Senate Bill number 6. Senator,
Got to vote on it.
voice vote? Would you like a voice vote?
Yes, I would.
Mr. Puffer, or excuse me, all in favor? All in favor of House Amendment 2 to House Amendment 1 attached to Senate Bill 6, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. Representative Schwarzkopf.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker. We're back to Senate or House Amendment number 1. It's just a cleanup thing. Grandfathers in some current activity at the park, Cape Olympic State Park. May I have a voice vote?
Roll call, Mr. Speaker.
No, it's a voice vote on an amendment.
All in favor of the, please have a voice vote on the amendment. Aye. Opposed? So carried. Representative Schwarzkopf.
Senate Bill number 6 as amended is it's about Cape Olympic State Park, and it just clarifies parameters of the dead wreck inside the park and what they're allowed to do, not allowed to do, and offers protection for the public. Roll call.
Mr. Puffer, please call the roll.
Sir. Mr. Bomback.
Yes.
Mr. Bomback, yes. Ms. Bolden. Ms. Bolden, yes. Mrs. Briggs King. Mrs. Briggs King absent. Mr. Bush.
Yes.
Mr. Bush, yes. Mr. Chakwocha? Yes. Mr. Chakwocha, yes. Mr. Collins? Mr. Collins absent. Mr. Cook?
Yes.
Mr. Cook, yes. Mrs. Dorsey Walker?
Yes.
Mrs. Dorsey Walker, yes. Mr. Dukes? Mr. Dukes absent. Mr. Gray? Mr. Gray absent. Mrs. Griffith?
Yes.
Mrs. Griffith, yes. Ms. Harris? Ms. Harris, yes. Mrs. Heffernan?
Yes.
Mrs. Heffernan, yes. Mr. Hensley? Mr. Hensley absent. Mr. Orlovsky? Mr. Orlovsky absent. Mrs. Johnson?
Not voting.
Mrs. Johnson not voting. Mr. Lambert? Mr. Lambert, yes. Mrs. Longhurst?
Yes.
Mrs. Longhurst, yes. Mr. Lynn? Mr. Lynn absent. Mr. Matthews? Mr. Matthews, yes. Mrs. Minor Brown?
Yes.
Mrs. Minor Brown, yes. Ms. Moore?
Yes.
Ms. Moore, yes. Mr. Morris? Mr. Morris absent. Mr. Morrison?
Yes.
Mr. Morrison, yes. McNeil?
Yes.
McNeil, yes. Mr. Osinski?
Yes.
Mr. Osinski, yes. Ms. Parker Selby?
Yes.
Ms. Parker Selby, yes. Ms. Phillips? Ms. Phillips, yes. Mr. Postles? Mr. Postles absent. Mr. Ramon? Mr. Ramon absent. Ms. Romer? Ms. Romer, yes. Mr. Schwarzkopf?
Yes.
Mr. Schwarzkopf, yes. Mr. Short absent. Mr. Shoup absent. Mr. Smith absent. Mr. Spiegelman absent. Mr. Vanderwyn absent. Mrs. Williams? Mrs. Williams, yes. Mrs. Wilson Anton? Mrs. Wilson Anton, yes. Mr. Yerrick absent. Mr. Acting Speaker?
Yes.
Mr. Acting Speaker, yes. Mr. Acting Speaker, the roll call reveals 24 yes, 1 not voting, 16 absent.
Senate Bill 6 is amended by Senate Amendment 1 and House Amendment 1 as amended by House Amendment 2 is hereby declared to pass the House.
Yay, Lumpy.
Peace, love, and rock and roll. Representative Longhurst.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We're going to go to item number 6.